Thank you very much, everyone, for having us all here. I'll get right to it because we've had a lot of chat, so I'm going to get through these intros quite quickly. From the looks of the audience, I think these panelists are known to many of you, so I'll keep it brief. Malado Baldwin, here on my far right, is, of course, the co-curator of the current exhibition downstairs, X Marks the Spot, which really has proven to be quite a success, so we're very excited about that. Her recent work includes a film screening of she is an LA-based artist, I should mention, as of a few years ago, but of course went to the studio school 2004 to 2006, like me, right? Yeah. Her recent work includes a film screening at the all-female festival Fair Play Miami, co-publication, and reading for 7x7 LA at the Torrance Art Museum. She does feminist curatorial projects as a founder of the Association of Hysteric Curators, and Michael Hebron's ongoing gallery tally project at Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions and other institutions worldwide. Since 2014, she has co-managed the studio of Lebanese artist Huguette Caland, and just finished a great big book on that artist as well. Wonderful. Andrea Bekag, of course, just beside Malado. Yeah, needless to say, we're really lucky to have this panel. A New York-based painter who lives part-time in the Rockaways. Is that true to stay still? Still part-time in the Rockaways?
Well, yes.
That's good. She is shown both nationally and internationally with works featured at the Jewish Museum, the New York Museum, Mike Weiss Gallery in New York, and Gallery Heinz Holtman in Cologne. She will be having a solo show, Beachcomber, at Phillips Line Gallery in September, and recently curated an exhibition, Gardening on the Moon, at George Lawson Gallery in California. She was also recently commissioned by MTA Arts and Design to do a public piece for the Avenue U stop in Brooklyn. It is titled Brooklyn Transition and was just recently installed. So great. She is currently a faculty member at the School of Visual Arts. And of course, Joyce Pensato to my immediate right. Joyce.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Joyce Pensato is a Brooklyn-based painter who has exhibited widely, including at exhibitions at the Kunstraum Innsbruck in Austria, the Modern Art Museum at Fort Worth, Santa Monica Museum of Art, the Contemporary Art Museum in St. Louis, the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco, among many others. I couldn't include a whole list. She is currently preparing a wall drawing to fit a space 50 feet across for an exhibition at the South London Gallery in the UK in 2019. How's that going?
I didn't start it yet.
In 2019, she will present new work in the Logan Gallery at the Denver Art Museum, and in 2020, she will have a solo exhibition at this is the word you were warning me about, the Kenzner Gesellschaft Museum in Hanover, Germany. We'll let you look that up for yourself if you need to.
Forget about it.
So there's been, as I say, a lot of introductory talk tonight, so I won't say too much except by way of that, except that it's wonderful to be here. I think the show downstairs added a lot of vitality, and I'm really, really curious about our panelists tonight. I think I'm not disclosing anything I shouldn't when I say that, Malado and I were in the same year together and have been close friends ever since. And as I understand it, the two of you studied and have, you guys
long ago.
And it's almost like two friends sort of bracketing here, and different times, different views, and I'm just very curious what's going to come out tonight. When I first circulated these questions, I've kept them very general quite intentionally, but the one perhaps that interested me the most is the one I'll ask the first, which is to say actually I should have looked this up, but as far as I know, this is probably one of the first all-women shows, or female-identifying shows, that the school has put on. It's a bit unusual for the school to do something along these lines, and there's probably reasons for that, and as people have been alluding to it tonight, the school has very distinct ethos and aesthetic, and the idea of doing so, it tends to focus more on things that are observable and material, and there's so much emphasis on the real work being done that there isn't always so much thought around some of the peripheral issues, but perhaps not peripheral, perhaps central, to be discussed. But the idea of a show divided by gender is sort of new for the school. And the first very open-ended question, and I would hope that panelists feel very free to open it as honestly as possible, as to what were your thoughts about hearing of a show like that, and what were your thoughts to being asked to be included on this panel, and just in general, what do you feel about the studio school doing a show like this? So you know what, I'll start with maybe Andrea or Joyce, jump in.
Okay. I have a problem with all gender show. You know, I think it just should be open. You're a painter, sculptor. I know there's a feminist view, but I have a problem with that. What was the other question?
Well, that's sort of I mean, what do you think about appearing on the panel and having to talk about it? Because it's nice that you're here, but we did wonder.
Thank you. When I was, got an invitation, my feeling was, and I feel strongly about this, I'm waiting to hear the school honor Mercedes Matter, like they do in their benefits and stuff. And I did ask Vita Peterson. I said, was that Mercedes' choice? I don't know, I'm going on and on.
No, this is fine. I want to hear what you're thinking.
I feel really strongly about this, and I feel the whole school, this woman, was such an inspiration and got the school started. I mean, she was incredible. There's two strong women in my life who were my mentors, Joan Mitchell and Mercedes Matter. God bless them. And they gave me everything who I am now. And Mercedes, I was good. I was there for a good 6 years, 4 years, and 2 years as a halfway house. So no, they had to get me out and throw me out in the middle of summer. So, but I got so much from the school, and I still keep the tradition of, I do drawings like Giacometti and I paint like de Kooning. I still keep that up. So I'll pass it on to Andrea.
Thank you. Yeah.
You brought up a lot of things. Can you hear me? Am I live? Mercedes was unique, and she created the school. And it wasn't an ordinary school. She had a very strong connection with all the students, for better or for worse. She would call your mother. She would get you a psychiatrist, and I swear to both of those things. She was an inspiration. She showed us that there was a possibility of being an artist when none of us, or I certainly had no idea how to do it. I didn't come here thinking I would be an artist, because I couldn't imagine being alone in my studio for the rest of my life. Little did I know that I relish that. I don't draw like Giacometti, but I do only use natural light, which makes me a bit of a dinosaur. The school was her creation. It was her creative act, and she was passionate about all aspects of it. But I want to get back to something that you said in answer to the first question, okay?
Oh, okay.
About you're not a feminist, or you don't think that, you don't agree with a feminist outlook that would have an all one gender show. I'm a feminist, and I also don't think it's a good idea. I think it doesn't address what's really going on in the world, which is falling apart. And we've learned certain things from that. We've learned that feminism, women's rights are tied to everybody's rights.
Right.
What about class? What about race? What about nation? What about sexuality? How do you bring those things into it? By saying, and I'm very glad that there was one female identified artist, because that wasn't in the description. And when I saw...
It was, but carry on.
Not when I saw it on Elisa's Facebook page, and we had a little back and forth about that. And I said that this, the studio school is known as a great school for painters. It is amazing the number of great painters that have come out of this school. And to just tie it to women, I think it robs everybody a little bit.
I could clarify that a little bit.
So I would like to hear, Malado's, your question is modified a little bit. Why
Yeah.
did you put on this show of all?
Why did I put on
Pressure's
the show?
on a little bit now, but let's hear it.
Well, I think Maya and I both felt, 12 years post-graduation, that so many of our peers were women in school. The school was founded by a woman, or one of the founders, the dean, the main teacher, the person that gave it its beginning. And we've watched over time as so many of our peers have struggled in their careers, and we felt like this was a celebration of amazing talent, and it just happens to be us trying to give an opportunity for many women to showcase their work, essentially. So,
Can I speak to that?
Yes, of course, yeah.
I teach, and I've been teaching for a long time. And I've seen, I don't know if this was always true, but it is certainly true now, the majority of art students are
women.
female.
Exactly.
And then that is not what we see in the art world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you do about that?
You support your peers and you put on shows, and until the balance is equal, maybe we need a little more on that side.
Well,
That's my feeling. But I am a third wave feminist. I came of age in the 90s and the 80s in DC as a punk rocker. It's a slightly different feeling generation to generation what feminism means, and I think we're trying to adapt it to a new era, and that's why we included female identifying and tried to open it up and tried to choose work that wasn't just about motherhood, it wasn't just women painting women, but was instead a broad range of styles and mediums, and yeah, that was our intention.
I'll just step in for a minute, to say a little bit about why I started with that question. Obviously, I think it needed to be addressed off the bat. But I'm also very curious about the idea of these feelings that come up, because for me, I think it runs very deep. To be honest, Andrea, I relate very much to what you're saying. I've always seen making artwork, and I have a 3.5-year-old, so I don't actually make as much work as I used to, but I can still talk as a painter, I think. That relates to the conversation too. Yeah. But, I always liked to feel that art making was a space that was sort of, when I'm in the studio, I'm free of anything that might hold me back other than, oneself, and that's what I see to be the struggle in the studio. It's quite uncomfortable for me to bring in ideas that maybe people view the work differently, or they don't collect it as much, or they don't put it up as much because I am a woman. I don't like thinking that way. I don't enjoy it. It's much more comfortable for me to think, well, it's a meritocracy and everybody does their best and the best rises to the top. It's easier, it's more comfortable, and it's more focused on the work itself, which is where my interests have always lied. That being said, I was very intrigued when Malado invited me to speak on this panel. I thought, good grief, I'm more of a studio school type painter. This isn't really my cup of tea, but what am I going to say? And I do think that there is this discrepancy of, as you said, students, most people in art schools are women, and yet by the time there's that idea of who's really the star, who's really the best, whose work gets collected, it's still primarily male. Now it's changing, but there must be something along that spectrum that happens between art school and the careers of very successful artists, where maybe something is run around, and maybe it's something we can think about. And the nice thing is we're not, nothing against a gender studies class or anything like that, but we're not in that environment. We are at the studio school, and we are talking about women painters. And I guess what I'm saying is I think there's still room for that conversation.
It's an important conversation. I just would approach it differently than an all-female show. I think, and I suggest this to my students, first of all, I don't think it's a meritocracy. That was like a big awakening to me.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that. When you realize that, and what your thoughts are on that idea of meritocracy.
It stinks. I mean, it's like, losing your innocence when a dealer tells you that in the studio.
Tell me more about that.
That's it.
Yeah.
But there are things that you can do to combat that. We have social media, and it's become an important tool for artists to post their work and to post the work of other people that they like, to be curators. If you can't find a space to curate a show, you can do it online, you know, and it doesn't even cost anything. You can write. There are a lot of artists that are writing. There are many ways of putting yourself out in the world. It's called agency now. The two words that I came up with this week, intersectionality, which means everybody gets helped by the same effort, but we have to address all the problems at once. And agency, how to make yourself powerful. And that comes as an antidote to it's not a meritocracy. That's a way of empowering yourself. So I'm not saying that there aren't the problems, I'm just saying I would address them differently.
Okay, that's fair. Joyce, do you want to jump in on that?
My feeling, and maybe I'm coming from this old school or whatever, is the work is the most important. And also your mentality, you have to be ready. I hope I'm not confusing anything.
No.
But you have to be ready for when the call comes. But I think you have to have a confidence in yourself and say, I'm ready, and then just go for it. But I think the work is the most important thing. All that other stuff is bullshit.
Does the confidence come from the work, from finally producing?
I think, yeah, the confidence, also age, working and age, and then you don't give a shit about anything as long as the work is there. And hopefully, there's always somebody who will see something in what's going on. But it is harder. I mean, when we were in school, there were so few women to look up to. And I was fortunate enough to meet Joan Mitchell. And I thought, oh my God, you know, I can't believe Joan Mitchell's talking to me. But she was in the art history books. But there were so few women out there who were recognized. And now I think the door is open. It's still probably, it's still probably harder for the women still struggling to get there.
But there are women in history for younger artists to look
Yeah,
at, and it's very
much
important.
more, much
It's
more.
very important. I remember when Joan Mitchell came to the school, I don't know if it's an important story, but
Yeah.
it was important to me. I was so anxious to meet her, because she was going to go around to see different artists that Mercedes had picked out.
Right.
And I had to waitress my way through school here. And I had to leave school every day at 4:30, or maybe it was 3 days a week. And she was coming during that time slot to my studio. I ended up losing my job. Susan Scott, actually, I sent her in to sub.
Wow.
It was not a big hit. I lost the job, but I got to meet her, and it was
Wow.
fine. It was
Yeah.
fine.
What was
And
she like? What was Joan Mitchell like?
She was generous and kind, you know, and it was a bit of a standoff between Mercedes and Joan Mitchell in my
yeah.
studio. Oh, yeah. But it was worth it. It was worth it. And to this day, I still think she's one of our greatest painters.
Oh my gosh, she's up there. I was fortunate to, a friend had told Joan to come see my work at the come see me and at the studio school. This is after she met you.
Yeah.
And I was, the story goes, I showed her all these Batman drawings all over the floor, everywhere.
did you show her?
It was
Sorry?
on the third floor.
Yeah. What did you show her? Sorry.
All these Batman drawings. that I
Batman
did.
drawings. Got it. Yeah.
And then she said, no, she was this, I saw her as a tough word, kind of a movie star to me with a fur coat, sunglasses, and, you know. And we went over to O. Henry, remember a cafe to have a beer, a hamburger. And I proceeded, I just got on to having martinis that year. So I had about 6 martinis. And it was about 9 p.m. when I started to get up, and that was the last I knew. So I wanted to keep up with her drinking, and we were
good luck.
talking, and that was the
God.
end of that. That was the end of me. but she gave me that a woman could do their thing. I mean, she has such passion about painting, her dogs, music, poetry, and of course drinking. But you know, she raised me totally a painter, and that gave me something. That's what she gave me. Now, what she didn't quite get my work. She always would say, "Do you still have that skin disease? And are you still doing the animals, meaning the Mickey Mouse?" and my work. So I was the opposite of her. The story I told often. She would, because I would visit her for 6 months or so out in the country, and then I'd go every summer for a couple of years. And the first year, she would say, "Do you want to be a French painter with light and color, or do you want to be one of those German expressionists without color and dark?" And that summer, I was brainwashed. And so I would tell her, "Oh, Joni, I want to be a French painter with light and color." And then when I got back 6 months later, I realized I was one of those German expressionist painters.
You're a Brooklyn painter.
A New York painter.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my story of Joan.
Well, I would have to
was gonna
say,
that influence.
studying at the school in more recent times, that the school has continued the tradition of having many female teachers, and that I was blessed to have many amazing professors, including Elisa Jensen and Ofra Shemesh, and visiting artists like Susanna Coffey, and that was a big part of my inspiration, was having women artists around that were my teachers. So I think the school has continued in that tradition very much so.
Probably more so.
Yes, more so
More
than
so.
other schools, I believe, actually. Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah.
And Andrea, you mentioned you were a teacher, and when you're teaching, how do you think about this topic?
It's too intertwined with everything else. I show a lot of art in my class because there's a computer there. I look at somebody's paintings. I feel like that they should look at somebody. So I'll Google that artist, whatever. Yeah, I mean it's part of the currency feminism, and there are courses taught on feminist art. But I also look at African American artists. I look at artists from different cultures, incorporating non-traditional artists. There's not an agreed upon term, is there, David? Outsider's been kicked out. Vernacular,
Self-taught, workable.
Outlier.
No,
yes.
nobody likes that in the field. No.
Well,
Okay.
people that weren't formally educated in art. How's that? It's not, snappy, but it's true. So I show a lot of that. The conversation is dispersed. One similarity between now and teaching now and when I was a student in the 70s here is that it's a very politically charged era. And the real question is, how do we deal with that? I mean, when I was here in the 70s, we would stay up all night making flags and posters and throwing them out the window.
Marching going on and all that.
And I'm doing that now, I hope you all are too, because, and how your work speaks to that is important. Not everyone is a political artist, and I've made a distinction between politics and my painting, and they're both very important to me. That's all.
Is it important if someone were to see your work, and this is to all three of you, if someone were to see your works, not from another planet perhaps, but just from a point of outside, and say who did this work, is it at all important to you that they would be able to know this work was done by a woman?
No.
No.
Jen and I were working on a show of femininity, and we were taking the idea of femininity and seeing where it came up. And I'll talk about another alumni, Glenn Goldberg.
Right.
Now there's a feminine aspect to his work, much more so than Joyce.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
Okay, so it's not important to you. So it's interesting. I mean, even though you have tremendous concern for, if I'm hearing you correctly, is much wider representation, much greater interest in.
Yeah, but
people
I
who
think
have-
feminism and the female and the gender issues have been revised. We now see that there's a spectrum of gender and
Sure.
sexuality.
Sure.
So it's not a black and white situation.
Of course not. But I guess what I'm saying is, how important is it that you be read back into your work? And you would say not very, and that's fair. That's fair if it's coming from concerns where it's this idea of the work existing very separate from the artist once it's completed. Then that's fair. But I do think it's an interesting question to what extent we read ourselves into our work and people read ourselves out of our work. For me, I think I'd be a little put out if people didn't know my work was made by a woman. So it's just a different thing. Malado, do you know what the question is? Does it make sense, this idea of...
Yeah, currently I'm making work, films, and books about boys and the love of men, so it's kind of a reverse gaze, and I actually think it is interesting to have it known that it's by a woman, I think that's part of what makes it
Because it's
interesting.
central to the work.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So it's a decision you make before you make the work.
It's just who I am.
Well,
The series is about men. It's about my search for love in men and my love of men.
But you're very specific, both of you, that you want your work read as
Well,
work by
often
women.
people think I'm
No,
a
I'm
man
not
because I have an O
specific.
at the end of my name. So I have, at various points in my life, been addressed pre-social media as a man, and that's a very sort of interesting dynamic for me to sort of have that possibility either way.
And no, just to answer your question with me, it's not a decisive thing. It's not an element of the work that I think one would do a critical read into. I just realized that as a human being, there's a certain amount of that aura of, that I would want accompanying the work. So it's more in that gray area, and that's why I ask it just out of curiosity.
Well,
Joyce, is
either
it-
it's in the work or it's not. I mean, I'm thinking of like something that Stanley Whitney said, and he also went to the studio school. He says, I don't wake up every morning and think I'm a black painter,
Right.
and I don't go to my studio thinking I'm a woman painter or a
course.
lady painter. That's just
Yeah.
not the way I
Yeah.
No,
think.
and that's what I was referring to at the beginning of the conversation. I think most people experience the studio as a place of freedom from that, or at least many people I know do. Joyce, is it important to you that people would know if they...
No.
No, not at all. Okay.
But someone said, because I was just, this is years ago, I would sign my name just Pensato. And then actually it was an older male who said you should put your first name so they know you're a woman. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good.
Right.
As, saying a statement.
Also, you're not the only Pensato. You've got a brother that's an artist, too.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I really appreciate everybody's responses on this because I recognize it's tricky territory. To change the tack a little bit, well, let me read a quick question because I don't want to leave it just yet. Mercedes Matter, did she talk about being a woman? Did she?
Oh, no, she said, I don't want to deal with that.
It was part of
It was
a philosophy
another
model.
generation.
She said it was the age of women. I don't have to deal with that. You know? Women were going to get everything.
I see.
But she used all her female wiles. I mean,
That's
she
right.
was very, she was
a femme fatale.
a courtesan, She, yes, Jen?
Yeah, please. Please.
I was thinking as you're talking that, part of this might be generation, because so many women for generations were dismissed. Like, oh, I can tell that's made by a woman. Like, that was a disparaging comment, and probably still happens. So it's so interesting, like, to see, like, up here, like, the generation say, like, oh, I want my work to be, I want it to be known that I'm a woman.
But Joan
the
Semmel,
side of it was that people were, dismissed. It's like, I can tell this is made by a woman. Like, that's a disparity.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that angle. I hadn't thought of that. I was thinking much more about people's relationship to whether it's I don't want to say purely formal because it's not the right way to talk about it. Although your paintings certainly, Andrea, are very, it's a word, I don't want to say pure abstractions, but, they really exist in that realm. Well, I was thinking more about the nature of the work and the nature of the extent to which the artist was in the work. But I see your point. I think you're reading something very smart into it.
As Andrea said, we came up with this show idea, and one of the reasons it hasn't materialized
I think that's the real question as we came to
But you
it.
should put men in the show that make fun.
Well, of course.
But it's such a,
We do,
I
yeah.
do still think it's a very interesting topic. I think about it a lot, actually.
Yes, of
You know,
course, in your life,
and
yeah.
Especially since we did get pretty far in this, like, kind of fleshing out this idea. So I think about it all the time, but I recognize also how tricky it is. So I think the most interesting thing would be to do, if we're going to do this show, is that it's not just women. So you identify, you define things that
You're looking for feminine components.
Yeah, a man could be a feminist.
Or have feminine qualities that he's trying to express. Or it also, we can't get into an essentialist thing that women are a certain
Yeah,
way,
exactly.
men are a
Right.
certain way, and even feminine, what is that? I mean, my work, you may see it as it's abstract, but it's also very intimate to me, the whole process, and they're emotional to me, and I don't know what gets released for somebody else to see, and I can't control how somebody is going to see that. And then it depends on how you're going to define all these things, because there are many feminisms, and there are many approaches to femininity too.
Well, that's also one of my questions. I mean, I think I mentioned in the questions I passed around is that I was at a funny gallery talk not too long, really nice one actually, with Elisa Jensen and Mary de Vicentis. And the gallery owner just said point blank, he said, I think it's a great time for women painters. And it was about painting, this talk. And he said, I think they make better painters than men right now. What do you think? And obviously it's a tricky way to start a conversation, but this idea of, what's that? It's a tricky way to start a conversation, but it ties into what you guys are getting at. And what interests me as someone who's looking at art and writing about it sometimes is, what are there any, first question is, are there any conclusions we can draw at all about
No.
work made by women? No. Probably no. But if
I thought
there's-
of one thing though.
But if
and
we
think-
start to see more, and if we start to see greater representation, which I think a show like Downstairs really, it does serve a purpose. If we start to see that kind of representation, are there any things we can take away from it? Are there any things we can learn from each other, or to start to maybe push the boundaries a little bit in the art world in terms of saying, some quality that might have been previously overlooked is now becoming more valuable. Now that conversation, of course, happened right when you guys were studying in the 70s and the 60s, when women's, the idea of doing textile art became more important, or ceramics became more important. The idea that things that were traditionally seen as feminine were suddenly, pushed to the forefront by a lot of really amazing artists at that time. But I think there's still some very subtle conversations, and it is more subtle than just saying, here's a quilt and now it's art, but I think there's some very subtle things that lean towards the feminine, meaning the collective result when many women seem to be making work, things that you can deduce from that. I think there are some very important traits that are starting to emerge, and I saw that in the show. So that being said, you're saying there aren't any traits that could be seen as feminine, but do you see any developments in work, in contemporary work, that does relate to more women making work and to more ideas being generated by women?
I think a lot of this is economics too. I think it's who's supporting the artist. But no, I think this is like just, huge generalizations. Why are women, there are a lot of great women painters right now. There's no doubt about it. Why? I don't know. It could be, and it's not true all across the board, but painting is a single artist alone in the studio, for the most part. And a lot of men are involved, and some women too, so this is like another generalization, but studios that have high production values and have a lot of stuff going on, and that's supported in a certain way in the art world economy. It's not about painting, it's about something else. And that something else is important, but that's one possibility. Yeah. That's the only thing I can think of.
I wanted to keep to the work. The auction houses and all that craziness. It is a bit of a separate conversation. In this particular area, I'm interested in the work itself, and I do wonder what starts to emerge when artists are working. But Joyce, would you side with Andrea on that? You don't see any.
You just have to be true to yourself, and go in there, and it's you and your work and your studio. And if you need a production thing, go for it, you know. But you have to be true to yourself and just look at your work and forget about all that bullshit with talking and get all those out of your head.
What do you think,
Well, there
Malado?
aren't value judgments. There's amazing women, there's amazing men, there's amazing trans. There's a lot of, we're living in a time of renaissance, this is how I see it, where there's a proliferation of MFA programs and a lot more people are becoming artists. I think social media has made it so that more people are versatile in terms of visual capacity, and we can share with people that we've never met. We have more of a platform. I agree with you on that. It's a very special time. Yeah, we're in an interesting time, and I think we do have to keep pushing so that women get seen and shown, because there is still a very big disparity in the museum world and the major galleries and the small galleries. And most of my peers have sort of witnessed it and are sort of very, I know a lot of very strong, very ambitious, very talented women who just keep hitting their heads against a wall and kind of going, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening?
I guess the thing I would sometimes think about in relation to this is that there's the danger a little bit of a woman having to play in a man's world to be successful. And I think there's a little bit of that in these wonderful artists who we adore, like Helen Frankenthaler, who was clearly so at ease, with a bit of a boys' club at that time, and really could hold her own, if I may say though, a little bit by those rules. And, good for her. She's an incredible painter and was able to do that. I am increasingly interested in people and artists that might not be interested in or questioning or just naturally not maybe as in line with some of the traditions that are a little bit more boys clubby, a little bit more, more to do with competition, more to do with conflict, debate. Well, I'm all for conflict. That was very good at the beginning of the talk. But I do think there are some elements that are starting to emerge that are a little bit more feminine. And I've also got my notes, it's about being as much yourself. And I think if you're a woman that is not interested in being, aggressive and putting the work out there, but you're still focused on making images that are as true to yourself as possible, if those images, if those works, whatever the work is valuable, then I think now is the time when those, and I will say, more feminine elements might be more useful. So I guess the reason I was interested in this talk is I want to see just a little, personally in my life, I'd like to see a little bit more space for what could loosely be called more feminine approaches to art making, and I think that's important. One thing I also want to get to is, and we touched on it, but the really nice stories of sort of personal, in people's personal trajectories, when good things happen through influences or when the confidence came, when interesting ideas happen. I wondered if you guys could just share a little bit about that. I'm switching topics now because I think we'll wrap up pretty soon. I can tell there's questions in the room. So I want a little bit more, maybe from the panelists, about things that have been positive and things that might be positive going forward.
So many of my opportunities have been given by women, of course, but I also know that Margaret Luschek was one of our teachers of Maya and I, and Maya said, Malado and I were frustrated, we're making work and it's not being seen, and she's sort of sitting in our studios, what can we do, what can we do? She said, why don't you propose a show? Why don't you approach the school? I think they'd be open. Why don't you and Malado get together and do that? And to come here and actually have Graham and Rachel and Michael be so supportive of this endeavor was actually a really rewarding experience. I would also say that curating is a really, unlike being an artist where you feel like you're asking all the time, curating feels very generous, and it's a very wonderful experience. And we had a really hard time choosing because there was such amazing talent and so much of it. And we feel very proud of the diversity of the show in terms of material and medium, style, and we're just very happy that we could put it on. So, yeah, thank you.
And I do want to extend that question to Andrea and Joyce as well. Just really closing thoughts or anything that you think is or that was positive in your life or your trajectory so far.
I do want to stress that there's a distinction between what goes on in your studio and the passion you have for your work, and you close the door and it's you and your work, and that passion has to sustain you whether you show or not.
Right.
And how you are in the world is a whole other set of issues. And it's not feminine, and it's not feminist, and it's not male. There are a lot of issues. Helen Frankenthaler was a very wealthy woman. That brings up class issues. And she was also married to one or two was she married to Motherwell?
Motherwell.
And then Greenberg?
No.
Well, it's like, anyway, she was way in there. That was her way, and very comfortable in that milieu. So you can't really discuss feminism without discussing class. And if you are ambitious to be in the world, there are things that you can do, and you can have agency, you can take charge and do them. But your main concern, as Joyce said, is in the studio, and that has nothing to do with anything else that we've discussed.
Okay. Thank you. That's great.
I think one of the main things that happened to me that was like a major thing for me, way back in 1989 or so, my work was, I was doing these abstract paintings, and I was doing these Mickey Mouse drawings. I was it looked like two different artists. And I was getting recognition for these abstract paintings and also for the drawings. And what happened to me, I was shocked because I was having a show of these abstract paintings, and 2 weeks before the show was canceled. I thought, oh, the worst thing I have to do is tell my parents and my family what a loser now I am. And but it was so shocking. It made me take a look at what I was doing, and I realized I have this love for the drawings, black and white. Forget about these abstract paintings that look like everybody else's abstract paintings.
Except Hell's.
And that was a major, once I kind of accepted who I was, everything fell in place. And that was like a major thing for me. All good stuff started to happen. And then it went down, and then it came back up 10 years later. So it's all good. It's accepting who you are and your good parts.
Fantastic.